Welcome to Conversations from St. Norbert College, a program that invites you into discussions taking place in your community on today's local and global issues. Now, your host for Conversations from St. Norbert College, the Dean and Academic Vice President of the college, Michael Marsden.
Good evening. My name is Michael Marsden, and I'm your host for this edition of Conversations from St. Norbert College. Tonight we'll be visiting with Dr. William Hynes, the sixth president of St. Norbert College, who recently announced that he would be stepping down in June of 2008 from the presidency. Dr. Hynes has served as the president of St. Norbert College since 2000. Previously, he served as the academic vice president at St. Mary's College of California, and before that as the academic dean at Regis College. He earned his undergraduate degree in philosophy and English from Immaculate Conception College, a master's degree in religious studies from Marquette University, and a master's degree as well as a doctorate degree from the University of Chicago in the history of American religious thought. Dr. Hynes is active in community and higher education circles. Bill, welcome to our program. We're really pleased to have you here.
Mike, it's a pleasure to be with you again.
Thank you. You know, you announced this past May that you'd be stepping down at the end of the next academic year, and I think we'd like to take a little time here to talk about your tenure here, because your tenure as president actually exceeds the national average by, by a third. And I think that in itself is interesting. But looking back on the 7, now almost 8 years that you have had leadership here at St. Norbert College, what would you say would be maybe the 3 or 4 really top accomplishments of your administrative team?
Well, thanks, Mike, and thanks for those kind words, and thanks for having me as a guest. Pleasure to be here. If I had to pick 3 out of a slightly larger number, I would probably say, first of all, rooting ourselves in our mission and our values and our traditions. One of the most important natural resources a college or university has is who it is, where it's come from, what are its founding values, what does it seek to accomplish. And I think particularly by creating a new structure and having a vice president of mission heritage, we've made sure that we are constantly keeping our values and our core beliefs at the front and center of everything we do. Mm-hmm. So I would say that I'd list that as first. I think that's important. You want to stick to your knitting, you want to know who you are, and you don't want to try to reinvent yourself in a continuous manner so that you become something other. That we have to change, absolutely. We'll talk about that a little bit later, perhaps. Second, I would put probably the transparency, bringing a new value, I think, into the college in which we want to make our finances as transparent as possible. We want to make all of our procedures as transparent as possible. And so today, for example, with a password, you can get into our website and you can go right into our budgets and see exactly where we are. You can go right into our endowment, see right where we are, go into our handbooks and you can see exactly where our policies are and so forth. Someone comes on something that they think so that the college is doing something untoward financially, there's a private, secure web page on or address on my web page where they can register a complaint. So this is a new era of transparency and
accountability, I assume.
Absolutely accountability. And the third is the financial condition of the college, as the chairman of the board said recently. The college has always been in good shape, but it's now in excellent financial shape. For example, in my tenure, we've raised some $73 million for the endowment and for projects. Hopefully we'll raise some more this year. Second, we have paid down our long-term debt from $17.6 million to about 6.2 this year. And finally, we're running not just balanced budgets, but budgets that produce net income, which we can use in the college every year. So, and we've also improved the compensation package for the faculty and for the staff so that we're more competitive nationally. So those are some 3.
Well, those are helpful. What do you think some of the major challenges are that you faced during that, again, 7 going on 8 years now, that you would say, okay, of the challenges I had when I came and that I had to get a team to work with me on, these might have been the top couple of challenges that we had to wrestle with? I mean, you've listed the outcomes. Going backwards, what were the challenges?
Well, I think obviously there were some financial challenges. That's implicit in what I said. Mm-hmm. I think colleges and universities have been challenged nationally by the fact that the federal government is giving less and less support for education, particularly at the collegiate level. We have managed to maintain and increase slightly our state support, which we're very grateful for. The state of Wisconsin gives grants to Wisconsin residents that they can use to help defray some of the cost.
Whether they're going to private or public colleges.
Yes, and it's a very good system. And but the challenge of the fact the federal government has cut way back on its support for higher education is that the higher education had to pick up that bill. And so we've had to increase the amount of income, the amount of money we're putting in for financial aid every year, and that takes a toll on one's budget.
Right. What about regrets? The areas where you think we really have not made enough progress and we should be making more progress?
Well, in my inaugural address, I dangled the possibility of a master's in international business, and we have not done that. And I personally am hopeful there will come a time when the college will have an MBA, perhaps an executive MBA, particularly now that we've improved our compensation packages and we're able to attract and retain excellent faculty. That's one thing. I think I wish that we had been able to raise more money for our endowment. Private colleges can't charge incoming students what it actually takes, what the actual cost of it is to provide the education. So what we have to do is we have to have income from investments. We have to have auxiliary enterprises and so forth. So I think those are the two. I wish that, I think it was in 2000 was the right time to have an MBA with perhaps a specialty in international business. For a variety of reasons, we're not able to do that. And second, I wish that we'd been able, you may remember the stock market decline after 9/11. That affected some of our ability to raise money. But we've raised a great deal of money. The three largest gifts in the history of the institution, a $10 million gift from the Mulva family for our library, and a $5 million gift from the Norbertines, the founding and owners religious order of the college. So we've done pretty well, but I think we should have done better.
Okay, that's good. I was wondering go back to the compensation package for a minute. The institution's entering the fourth year of that compensation adjustment, or market adjustment for compensation. And then you're entering a budget cycle, which will produce the fifth year of that adjustment. Do you know of any other college in the country that has had as consistent of an approach to adjusting the salaries using a national database?
Yes, I do, and in fact, we model ourselves after that university, and that's Gonzaga University in Spokane, Washington. And it's a very straightforward approach. You find out what the market. You go into national statistics that are available to all of us, and you go in field by field and job by job, and you see what the average is in that market, and then we try to work towards that average. Once we're at that average, then with an inflation factor, we can stay there. That means that it makes us very attractive for somebody coming in because they're making a nationally ranked salary in all areas except our hourly employees, and there we try to make sure they're at the median at least for Fox Valley.
Of the regional market, yeah. That point. And it's easier to describe to people and explain to people how we arrive at salaries.
Yes.
And that is a helpful thing too, and so on. I wanted to ask, and you may be a little uncomfortable with this term legacy, but most presidents are asked, to describe their legacy. Maybe I put it a different way. If someone were to try to write the story of your administration, what would be the highlights of the story?
Well, first, my argument with legacy. I'm not a subscriber to the great men or women of history where you go and center on a single person. And I think particularly in Wisconsin where 200 years ago, Wisconsin was socialist, and 100 years ago it was the seat of the Progressive Party and Bob La Follette. I rather think about the whole in all people. What's our legacy of our time together would be a more comfortable way. I would say, first of all, participatory decision making, where we try to take everyone's opinion into account. We have a budget and strategic planning process that starts from the bottom up, and it's worked extremely well. I cannot believe the progress that we've made in the budgeting process. Most people who have to do institutional budgets groan, and there's all sorts of fights that break out, and there's all kinds of games that people play. Ours is rather straightforward, and we have a group from the campus that goes through all of the requests. They rank them. They make the recommendations to you and to me and the other vice presidents, and 98% of the time we approve those. That gives people real confidence that the limited resources are being used well. I think focusing ourselves on our core values and monitoring, auditing ourselves to make sure that we're living those values on a day-to-day basis, those two would probably be, I think, the greatest legacy. And if all goes well, in a few months we'll break ground for a state-of-the-art library, which will be the first library that the college has ever built from scratch. We've always been using hand-me-downs, other buildings, and so forth like that. So those are three things. Maybe the team that I've put together, including yourself, I've never worked with a finer group of vice presidents who know how to get things done and yet are great skilled communicators and good listeners, and so the institution can move ahead expeditiously.
Thank you. Now, looking back, and of course your tenure has yet more months to run, but looking back on it so far at least, what do you think are probably, what I would say, maybe the thing you like most about your experience here as president? You've come to us from, and I know you taught at another institution beside the two that you were both a faculty member and an administrator at, but compared to other institutions, what sort of pleased you the most about St. Norbert College in your years here?
Well, I think several things. First, I think the Norbertine order and its philosophy is focused on contemplation. We try to be contemplatives in action. We try to be people based in thoughtful, reflective, prayerful centeredness, and then being engaged in our professions and in the world and hopefully doing good and hopefully fighting for social justice and so forth. I think that combination of contemplation and action are critical to a person's being able to survive and flourish and provide leadership in the modern world. So that combination, and we've reflected that in not just the Vice President for Mission Heritage, but by starting a once-a-week sacred hour in which people are encouraged not to work. They're encouraged to take time off for contemplation, for reading, for meditation. There is also an ecumenical prayer service that lasts about 40 minutes that everybody's invited to, and those are uniformly extremely well done. So I think that's one thing. The second thing is just the quality of the people. Quality of people with whom I work, the quality of the Norbertines, quality of the abbots that I've had the pleasure to work with, quality of the Board of Trustees. There's a wonderful camaraderie and a wonderful spirit about let's make sure our head's on right, and then let's make sure we go ahead full steam. So those two have been very important. And at a more personal level, you may know that Kiplinger's letter recently ranked Green Bay area, of course De Pere included in that, as one of the 5 best places to raise a family. And that has been the experience of my wife Margie and our 2 sons Kieran and Devin, is that they made friends instantaneously. There's tremendous economic diversity in Wisconsin. That was not the case where we were in the East Bay of San Francisco. There was greater ethnic diversity, but there was virtually no economic diversity. So their friends are across the whole range of possibilities. And
very positive. What about something you might have valued the least about your experience? I mean, that's the best, but were there particular things you'd rather not have had to deal with?
Well, a curious cultural thing, I think. And I've talked about this with other education leaders and with many business leaders, and they've confirmed this, and that is that there is at one and the same time, a quality which is very pleasant, is a quality that's also troublesome, and that is that there's perhaps an excess of politeness in this area, and so people don't like to break bad news to you. And I know of one situation where I worked with a person for an entire year, and in the end had to say goodbye to that person. And as I was doing that, several people with whom I worked very closely said, well, we knew about all those problems. Well, why didn't you tell me? And they said, well, we didn't want to disturb you. Well, I guess I would.
You'd rather have no one.
I'd rather have people, knock on the door and say, "Can I have 10 minutes? I've got some bad news. I'd like to give it to me early. Give it to me straight. But please don't be overly polite about that." So I don't know. Others may have. Maybe that's a topic for a future interview.
It might be.
But I would say that more typical of larger cities, perhaps, more typical of West and East Coast, people generally give you bad news a little faster. And I think that we could improve here in Wisconsin to give each other the bad news. As one of my trustees said, when you give me all this good news, I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop. So why don't you give me the bad news first, and then we'll have the good news. So I would say that's been something that I and others have struggled with.
Yeah. I want to remind our viewers that you're watching Conversations from St. Norbert College, and our focus this evening is on the tenure of Dr. William Hynes as the president of St. Norbert College. What about the coming year? We're in the middle of the beginning of an academic year, rather, in the middle of an agenda at least. And what are the highlights of the agenda for your eighth and final year?
Well, as I said, I certainly don't intend to be or act like any sort of lame duck. So we've got a full agenda. We've just issued a very important diversity report on how that we can make St. Norbert College even more diverse community, and that will be moving through and getting discussed by the community, and I hope to take that to the Board of Trustees for their endorsement, and then that will become a roadmap for our improving diversity. I have another commission on the status of women at St. Norbert College, and I've been able to use task forces like this on these topics and others. That's how we got the compensation package, for example. The community really studied this and then made recommendations. So those are two very important areas going forward. We also are anticipating breaking ground, as I mentioned, for the Mulva Library. This will be a huge addition to the college. It'll be right at the front of the campus. It will be open not only for the students, but it will always be open to the public, as our current library is. There are a whole series of challenges that present themselves this year. So I'm very eager to move ahead on all of those.
You won't be bored.
Well, I'd rather not rust out.
Yeah. The transition to a new president is always traumatic for any institution, college, university, any corporate world as well. Are you taking particular steps to make sure the transition is about as smooth as it can possibly be?
Insofar as it's appropriate for me to be taking those steps. For example, I'm not choosing the next president. Well, that's going to be an independent committee formed by the Board of Trustees and associated with a search firm. But certainly, my motto probably is steady as she goes. Try to keep things on track, keep us firmly rooted in the mission, keep us financially very adept and moving ahead, looking for opportunities, being entrepreneurial, and so forth. So I think to try to provide as steady a leadership as I can in the transition period, make decisions in a timely way, resolve some matters that maybe have been before us that haven't gotten resolved. Try to clean the decks for the incoming president as nearly as possible. That's a wonderful tradition in our profession, which is don't leave ticking time bombs for the next person. Try to clear the decks because it will take some time for them to learn the institution. So,
and no reason for them to have to deal with those.
I think I think the search process that's been put in place is reaching out to all constituents and involving everyone. So I think that guarantees a process that will give people confidence.
Mm-hmm. One of a kind of a question you would expect, I think, is there life after the presidency? Would you want to talk a little bit about your personal plans?
Sure.
Would you mind?
Sure. Well, I think the quick answer is definitely.
We hope.
There's life after the presidency. Well, there's, the presidency is a challenging job, and maybe we can talk about that in a moment. But I would say that there are certain realities of the job. You're looking at 16 to 18-hour days. You're looking at a lot of 7:30 a.m. meetings. You're looking at dinners that go till 10 o'clock at night, and you're looking at those on the same day. In fact, that's exactly the day that I'm in today. Began at 7:30 with a board meeting of a local economic development group, and we'll conclude tonight with a dinner with a friend of the college. So in between, lots of meetings. I used to kid as a writer that I came to administration having authored 3 books. And then when I entered administration, that year I wrote a few essays. And the next year I wrote a few book reviews. And the next year I wrote a few memos. And after that I wrote very little. So I'm looking forward to having more of my life under my own personal immediate control. I'm looking forward to having an opportunity to read. I'm looking forward to an opportunity to continue my liberal education. One of the awful temptations, not even temptation, one of the awful realities of a presidency is you are like a diabetic in a candy store. You cannot go to the lectures because you have to do other things. You cannot participate in some of the student activities that you're invited to because you have to be visiting with donors. You have to do this. So it's a complicated process, but it's both exciting, but it also means that you begin not to read as much as you should, not to sometimes enjoy life at its fullest. So I'm looking forward. 8 years is all the U.S. president gets, so I consider myself lucky to have served 2 terms.
Well, as I said earlier, it's higher than the national average for college presidents. What advice would you have for people? There are people who do aspire to college presidencies, and just wondering what advice you might have for them as you look back, because I think that could be a very helpful perspective for people as they think about it. I mean, you've already talked about the human demands, and I'm assuming consistent with psychological demands.
Sure. I mean, assuming the person is of sound mind, I would say, first of all, I would say it can be a very exciting, energizing job. It can be something where it should be something where it's not hard to rise from bed, that you are looking forward to the challenges of the day, that your mind is being stimulated. You walk in and what confronts you is perhaps a huge catastrophe or a huge challenge, and you have to fractionate that and cut it down to chewable bites and get business done. You have to find solutions where others have found no solutions. So that's very challenging. That's very exciting. The realities of being a college president are you have to be engaged in an immense amount of fundraising. You have to be engaged in a great deal of leadership inside the institution. You report to 4 or 5 or 6 different constituencies in a given moment. So keeping all of them happy all of the time is probably not possible. That's very difficult, very challenging. So for those who aspire to a college presidency, my best advice would be call up your local college president or university chancellor and say, could I come and shadow you for a couple of days? And if this is somebody outside academia, that would be essential. Right. If it's somebody who has come up through administrative ranks or faculty ranks or both, they probably have observed a number of presidents. But my first advice, just like I would say to somebody who wants to go to college, go look at colleges. I would go look at some college presidents. And there is a program from the American Council of Education that allows you to do that.
The ACE Fellows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's something I would recommend for people.
That's good.
Serious. And there are various summer schools. I've been to 2 of Harvard's summer schools. They're excellent. Other summer schools are excellent too. But there are summer schools that give you a taste of what it's like to be a president.
That's a good training ground. I want to ask you 2 futuristic questions, I guess. One is, what do you think is in the foreseeable future for St. Norbert College? I mean, if you looked 5 or 10 years down the road, I mean, what are some of the predictions you'd be comfortable making about both some of the challenges and some of the successes that are not inevitable, but probable?
Yeah, I would. I saw 2 quotes recently that helped me in that regard. The first is from Jack Welch, in which he says, when the rate of change outside the organization is greater than the rate of change inside the organization, the end is in sight. And the second is from Eric Hoffer, the longshoreman philosopher, in which he said, those who are learning will inherit the earth. Those who are learned will have an ability to explain a world that no longer exists. So part of what we have to do is to continue to have a balance between our traditions, our mission, our values, and our ability to adapt and relate to the modern world. So I think we've done that, particularly under your leadership in the academic programs, where we've adapted those programs. We've tried to have the best of the past and the best of the present. So that'll be one thing. The second thing will be the continuing financial challenge, is that private colleges and public colleges and universities will increasingly be challenged by their costs. I mean, we've managed to hold our costs firm while increasing our revenues. That will be the continuing challenge. And probably the last challenge is, going back to where we started, staying true to yourself, trying to be rooted in your mission, rooted in your intentionality, if you will, sticking to your fundamental knitting and not getting distracted from that.
What some people call mission drift.
Yes.
Not get involved.
Mission drift is good.
Good. That point.
Status quo and mission drift are two huge challenges.
Indeed. Recently, St. Norbert College has been reclassified by the Carnegie Commission, which has resulted in the U.S. News and World Report moving us from one of the top colleges in the Midwest, comprehensive colleges in the Midwest, to now one of the top liberal arts colleges in the country. What's the future of liberal arts colleges? I mean, what do you think is out there for the liberal arts colleges? And of course, it's good to be listed among the top liberal arts colleges, but the challenges don't go away; they just increase.
That's true. What's the future for liberal arts colleges? I think, in a sense, never better, because the values and the education provided by a liberal arts college are in increasing demand. Because we, as Gene Brody used to say, we're in the business of putting wise heads on young bodies. We are in the business of training leaders. We're in the business of training people who know how to learn and who will continue to learn. 60% of the students who graduate will change jobs within the first year. They will hold at least 5 professional positions during their lifetime. They will, in their 50s, be doing things that nobody envisioned at the time they went to college. A liberal arts graduate is prepared to learn to learn. They know how to find resources. They know how to analyze. They know how to construct a persuasive argument. And above all, hopefully, they have wisdom and a love of the common good. So in that sense, particularly these days, on the beginning of the 21st century, liberal arts grads are going to be in increasing demand because we need good leaders.
So you think there's increasing awareness of their value?
I do,
the
but I think
consumer market's going to increase.
I agree, but I think we also have to be more articulate about making that case.
Oh, okay.
You know?
Do you think we failed at that?
To a certain extent, we have. I mean, I worked with a wonderful man who used to get up to the freshman class, before the freshman class every year, and said, "I just want to explain that being a liberal arts college doesn't necessarily mean you're liberal." You know, the liberating there is that knowledge liberates you, that learning certain techniques and learning how the world is structured and certain disciplines gives you an immense freedom and an ability to act and to create good.
Phil, I want to thank you for being with us this evening and sharing your experiences with us. It's really been a pleasure.
Michael, the pleasure is mine. It's always good to be with you.
Thank you. And I would also like to thank our viewing audience for being with us as well. Please join us in future weeks as we continue to explore the world of ideas. And until then, I'm Michael Marsden for Conversations from St. Norbert College.